Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we're going to be diving back into the works of Mrs. Helena Blavatsky. This is the Secret Doctrine. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. Of particular interest again today is almost certainly going to be the Infinite Integrations playlist, where I teach people to do magic responsibly. With that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of this secret doctrine with primordial substance and divine thought. As it would seem irrational to affirm that we already know all existing causes, permission must be given to assume, if need be, an entirely new agent. Always allow your mind to be changed in the face of evidence. Assuming what is not strictly accurate as yet, that the undulatory hypothesis accounts for all the facts, we are called on to decide whether the existence of an undulating ether is thereby proved. We cannot positively affirm that no other supposition will explain the facts. Newton's corpuscular hypothesis is admitted to have broken down on interference, and there is, at the present day, no rival. Still, it is extremely desirable in all such hypotheses to find some collateral confirmation, some evidence aliunde, of the supposed ether. Some hypotheses consist of assumptions as to the minute structure and operation of bodies. From the nature of the case, these assumptions can never be proved by direct means. Their only merit is their suitability to express the phenomena, but they are representative fictions. If you would like a better understanding of ether, it is plasma. I will try to remember to link the resource, but it is available on my channel under suggested channels. The Thunderbolts Project, who I refer to often, if you go on their page and you search plasma, it will bring up a lot of videos that will actually go a long way to proving this. I believe that the fundamental mechanic, right, the Holy Spirit, the electromagnetic forces of creation are plasma. It is literally everything tied into one thing all at the same time. Right? Every individual atom and all of the space between those atoms is the Holy Spirit, is the electromagnetic forces of creation, is plasma. All the same thing. Is ether. Ether. This hypothetical Proteus, one of the representative fictions of modern science, which nevertheless was so long accepted, is one of the lower principles of what we call primordial substance, akasa in Sanskrit. One of the dreams of old, and which has now become again the dream of modern science. It is the greatest, just as it is the boldest, of the surviving speculations of ancient philosophers. For the occultist, however, both ether and the primordial substance are a reality. To put it plainly, ether is the astral light and the primordial substance is akasa, the upadhi of divine thought. In modern language, the latter would be better named cosmic ideation. Spirit, the former, cosmic substance, matter. These, the alpha and the omega of being, are but the two facets of the one absolute existence. The latter was never addressed or even mentioned by any name in antiquity except allegorically. In the oldest Aryan race, the Hindu, the worship of the intellectual classes never consisted, as with the Greeks, in a fervent adoration of marvelous form and art, which led later on to anthropomorphism. But while the Greek philosopher adored form, and the Hindu sage alone perceived the true relation of earthly beauty and eternal truth, the uneducated of every nation understood neither at any time. They do not understand it even now. The evolution of the God idea proceeds apace with man's own intellectual evolution. So true it is that the noblest ideal to which the religious spirit of one age can soar will appear but a gross caricature of the philosophic mind in a succeeding epoch. The philosophers themselves had to be initiated into perceptive mysteries before they could grasp the correct idea of the ancients in relation to this most metaphysical subject. Otherwise, outside such initiation, for every thinker there will be a "thus far shalt thou go, and no farther," mapped out by his intellectual capacity as clearly and as unmistakably as there is for the progress of any nation or race in its cycle by the law of karma. Outside of initiation, the ideals of contemporary religious thought must always have their wings clipped and remain unable to soar higher. For idealistic as well as realistic thinkers, and even free thinkers, are but the outcome and the natural product of their respective environments and periods. The ideals of both are only the necessary results of their temperaments, and the outcome of that phase of intellectual progress to which a nation, in its collectivity, has attained. Hence, as already remarked, the highest flights of modern Western metaphysics have fallen far short of the truth. Much of the current agnostic speculation on the existence of the first cause is little better than veiled materialism, the terminology alone being different. Even so great a thinker as Mr. Herbert Spencer speaks of the unknowable occasionally in terms that demonstrate the lethal influence of materialistic thought, which, like the deadly sirocco, has withered and blighted all good ontological speculation. There is a footnote here. For instance, when he terms the first cause, the unknowable, a power manifesting through phenomena and an infinite, eternal energy, it is clear that he has grasped solely the physical aspect of the mystery of being, the energies of cosmic substance only, the co-eternal aspect of the one reality, cosmic ideation. As to its noumenon, it seems non-existent in the mind of the great thinker, is absolutely omitted from consideration. Without doubt, this one-sided mode of dealing with the problem is due largely to the pernicious Western practice of subordinating consciousness, or regarding it as a byproduct of molecular action. From the early ages of the fourth race, when spirit alone was worshipped and the mystery was made manifest, down to the last palmy days of Grecian art at the dawn of Christianity, the Hellenes alone had dared to raise publicly an altar to the unknown God. Whatever St. Paul may have had in his profound mind when declaring to the Athenians that this unknown, ignorantly worshipped by them, was the true God announced by himself, that deity was not Jehovah, see, Holy of Holies, nor was he the maker of the world and all things. For it is not the God of Israel, but the unknown of the ancient and modern pantheists that dwelleth not in temples made with hands. Acts. And that is true, right? Jehovah is limited in his scope. The God that the Hebrews believe in required sacrifice in order to be able to do things. He required you to do things that were contrary to his laws in order to be accepted by him. He was directly opposed by a force that was co-equal to him, right? If Satan really has the ability to manipulate in the manner that he is attributed through Christianity, that puts him on an equal level with God. We went through that in Isis Unveiled. I don't know if we hit that in this one or not. It may be, right? She has hit that point several times before. And so, yes, then Jehovah was not the unknown God. Now, to me, God is unknowable, unscopable, right? He is beyond our mortal comprehension in very real ways. The closest I get to it is that he is the Holy Spirit, right? Which is literally everything in existence, right? All of it. He's not sitting on some throne watching to see if you're masturbating in the bathroom. He's not wondering if you're cheating on your wife, right? Those things are left to the laws. They're not left to his personal decision to cast you into a lake of fire. That's not the point of existence, and that is plain in the Bible, right? Refer to the Bible study if that is confusing. Divine thought cannot be defined or its meaning explained except by the numberless manifestations of the cosmic substance in which the former is sensed spiritually by those who can do so. To say this, after having defined it as the unknown deity, abstract, impersonal, sexless, which must be placed at the root of every cosmogony and its subsequent evolution, is equivalent to saying nothing at all. It is like attempting a transcendental equation of conditions for the true values of a set, having in hand for deducing them only a number of unknown quantities. Its place is found in the old primitive symbolic charts in which, as shown in the text, it is represented by a boundless darkness, on the ground of which appears the first central point in white, thus symbolizing coeval and coeternal spirit matter, making its appearance in the phenomenal world before its first differentiation. When the one become two, it may then be referred to as spirit and matter. To spirit is referable to every manifestation of consciousness, reflective or direct, and of unconscious purposiveness, to adopt a modern expression used in Western philosophy, so-called, as evidenced in the vital principle and nature's submission to the majestic sequence of immutable law. Matter must be regarded as objectivity in its purest abstraction, the self-existing basis whose septenary manvantaric differentiations constitute the objective reality underlying the phenomena of each phase of conscious existence. During the period of universal pralaya, cosmic ideation is non-existent, and the variously differentiated states of cosmic substance are resolved back again into the primary state of abstract potential objectivity. We have already dealt with this quite extensively as we went through part 1 of book 1, right? We dealt with it quite extensively in Isis Unveiled, so I'm not really going to get into it as much here, but this is as much of an assumption as she was attributing just now to the claiming that Jehovah was the god of the Greeks, right? It is just as much of an assumption to assume that there was never or was ever nothing, right? That is an assumption that you were making. It's probably correct, but it is an assumption. The concept that there are periods of growth and periods of decrease, that is a very real thing. That is the law of rhythms. But whether or not that goes down to nothing and then back up to something, that is subjective, right? That is something that is not objective. Looking at it from the outside, if you have the full scope of all time, then you can say that. But anything outside of having the knowledge of exactly how the universe came to be, you're going to be speculating, right? Even me, who I was taken on a spiritual experience and I witnessed the cosmos being born, right? That was a spiritual experience. It was not like a physical thing. And so again, I believe it, but it is not a truth, right? It is something that I firmly hold to, that I believe is a real thing. But I'm not going to tell you that it is the absolute, right? It is my speculations upon it. Just as much as I speculate that the plasma is the underlying fabric of the universe, which is the Holy Spirit, right? We are the differentiation. I believe that we are here to learn lessons. That is part of the experience, and that every lesson that we learn is for the divine. That is something that is outside of the scope of the divine. But again, that is a speculative thing. I claim it, I say it, I believe it, I hold it to be true. But you got to remember that it is always just speculation, because none of us can comprehend the full scope of God, much less how the mind works, if there is a mind. And I'm going to try not to keep hammering the point that this, right, the manvantaric, all of this, the underlying universal pralaya, those are all speculative, right? Every single bit of it. And many of them I don't really hold to. But we're exploring, we are learning, and there are concepts in here that I have taken and assimilated already, So, yeah. All right. Manventeric impulses commences with the reawakening of the cosmic ideation, the universal mind, concurrently with and parallel to the primary emergence of cosmic substance, the latter being the manventeric vehicle of the former, from its undifferentiated pralaic state. Then, absolute wisdom mirrors itself in its ideation, which, by a transcendental process superior to and incomprehensible by human consciousness, results in cosmic energy, Fohat. Thrilling through the bosom of inert substance, Fohat impels it to activity and guides its primary differentiations on all the 7 planes of the cosmic consciousness. Thus, there are 7 protiles, as they are now called, while Aryan antiquity called them the 7 prakriti, or natures, serving severally as a relatively homogeneous basis, which, in the course of the increasing heterogeneity in the evolution of the universe, differentiate into the marvelous complexity presented by phenomena on the planes of perception. The term relatively is used designedly because the very existence of such a process, resulting in the primary segregations of undifferentiated cosmic substance into its septenary basis of evolution, compels us to regard the protile of each plane as only a immediate phase assumed by substance in its passage from abstract into full objectivity. There is a footnote for protile. The term protile is due to Mr. Crookes, the eminent chemist, who has given that name to prematter, if one may so call primordial and purely homogeneous substances, suspected, if not yet actually found, by science in the ultimate composition of the atom. That would have to be like electron, proton, neutrons, right, as opposed to the elements themselves. And I know there are neutrinos and all these other things, but that is a good way to conceptualize it as the protons, electrons, and neutrons. But the incipient segregation of primordial matter into atoms and molecules takes its rise subsequent to the evolution of these 7 protiles. It is the last of these, having recently detected the possibility of its existence on our plane, that Mr. Crookes is in search of. Cosmic ideation is said to be non-existent during pralaic periods, for the simple reason that there is no one and nothing to perceive its effects. There can be no manifestations of consciousness, semi-consciousness, or even unconscious purposiveness, except through the vehicle of matter, that is to say, on our plane, wherein human consciousness, in its normal state, cannot soar beyond what is known as transcendental metaphysics. It is only through some molecular aggregation or fabric that spirit wells up in a stream of individual or subconscious subjectivity. And, as matter existing apart from perception is mere abstraction, both of these aspects of the absolute, cosmic substance and cosmic ideation, are mutually interdependent. This is one of those parts where I just absolutely disagree with the way that you're going about this, right? This is if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it really make a sound? Yes, it does. Observation does make a difference to many things. It can help you to shape reality, but reality exists independently of you. I do not believe that we are in an illusion. We are here through the will of God in an incarnation with real cause and effect. If a tree falls, it does make a sound, even if you're not there. If you're not observing the other room when the door is closed, the other room is still there. The things that are happening there are still happening there, whether you are there or not, whether you are observing them or not. You are in charge of your timeline. That is a truth that I hold, right? It is speculative, but it's the truth that I hold. That you shape your reality into the direction in which you direct it. But other people are directing their realities too. And each one of them, interlace, right? I do believe that there are multiple realities, that matter exists on all of them. And so matter existing apart from perception as mere abstraction is not true, right? The things that I have, like I've got plants that I grow and they're in a whole nother room. That the entire time I'm in here, they're still growing. They're still absorbing nutrients. They're still taking light from the air. They're still creating and becoming, even when I am not actively thinking about them. They change according sometimes to outside of the scope of my will. Sometimes they die and I don't understand why. Sometimes they flourish and I don't understand why. And it is not simply my will forcing that to happen. Those things happen regardless of whether or not you observe them. It's fun. It is fun to speculate. It is fun to take logic chains and say, well, maybe this could happen, or well, maybe this is this. But once again, that doesn't make reality, right? The observation of whether it is a wave or a particle, it is both at the same time. The only thing that changes is which one you are measuring. It is a wave or a particle in the form of a wave. It is literally moving in a wave as a particle. Those are not irreconcilable, right? You can reconcile these things, but we have a tendency to overcomplicate things through logic chains by extrapolating through the inferences that we make about the information that is available. And so for me, this right here is just annoying, right? Besides the fact that it really does not make a matter in does not make a difference in the long run, right? Regardless of whether or not it is true, there is something in the other room when your door is closed. You still have to go into the other room. You still have to deal with the things that are there. And so reality exists now, and it is fun to speculate on whether or not it always existed in the manner that we know. But as far as we know, it didn't. It exists differently. That is the assumption that you have to make if you were going to be dealing with logic at all, right? These things that I can measure have to be the things that I measure, not something that I am speculating upon the measurement of. You can formulate a hypothesis and make a test and see if it works and measure something that you're unaware of, but until you do that, it's not reality. Or it is reality whether you know it or not, right? 4,000 years ago, photons acted in the exact same way they do now, even though back then they thought that it was a god smiling at them. Back to the text. In strict accuracy, to avoid confusion and misconception, the term matter ought to be applied to the aggregate of objects of possible perception, and substance to noumena. For, inasmuch as the phenomena of our plane are the creation of the perceiving ego, again, I disagree with that, the modifications of its own subjectivity, all the states of matter representing the aggregate of perceived objects, can have but a relative and purely phenomenal existence for the children of our plane. As the modern idealist would say, the cooperation of subject and object results in the sense object or phenomena. But this does not necessarily lead to the conclusion that it is the same on all other planes, that the cooperation of the two on the planes of their septenary differentiation results in a septenary aggregate of phenomena which are likewise non-existent per se, though concrete realities for the entities of those of whose experience they form a part, in the same manner as the rocks and rivers around us are real from the standpoint of a physicist, though unreal illusions of sense from that of the metaphysician. That is because you are not dealing in reality. Right? I am a metaphysician, right? I believe in things that most people don't because I have experienced them, right? I have experienced divine intervention. I have experienced an angelic encounter. I have experienced being pulled out of my body. I have experienced leaving my body intentionally. I have experienced the manipulation of the electromagnetic forces of creation with trackable results, right? I have literally healed myself from afflictions through that. So I am a metaphysician, but I still stand on things that are measurable and that you can actually get a result from, right? If the world was purely illusion, Anyone that came close to awakening from the illusion would completely deconstruct reality for everyone, right? If it was purely subjective, it's not purely subjective. You can, however, affect the reality, right? You can change the direction of your intentions and literally pull in something that exists in reality, right? That is what you're doing when you manifest, right? I want to manifest this job. The job exists. You are simply trying to put yourself energetically on a level that resonates with that. And you do so by speaking it aloud. You do so by taking the actions to get the education required, or putting your application into the right places, or networking with the correct people. Those are actions you take to force the reality to conform to your desires. That is true for pretty much anything that you're trying to manifest, not just a job, right? If you're manifesting money, that money comes from somewheres. If you're manifesting whatever it is, it's coming from somewheres where it exists already in this reality. It would be an error to say or even conceive such a thing. From the standpoint of the highest metaphysics, the whole universe, God's included, is an illusion. But the illusion of Him, who is in Himself an illusion, differs on every plane of consciousness, and we have no more right to dogmatize about the possible nature of the perceptive faculties of an ego on, say, the sixth plane, than we have to identify our perceptions with, or make them a standard for, those of an ant in its mode of consciousness, which would be the third plane. The pure object, apart from consciousness, is unknown to us. Let's see what this footnote on consciousness is. Cosmic ideation focused in a principle, or upadi, basis, results as the consciousness of the individual ego. Its manifestation varies with the degree of upadi, e.g., that known to as manas, as well as mind consciousness. Through the more finely differentiated fabric, sixth state of matter, of the buddhi, resting on the experience of manas as its basis, as a stream of spiritual intuition. The pure object, apart from consciousness, is unknown to us, while living on the plane of our three-dimensional world. As we know, only the mental states it excites in the perceiving ego. And, so long as the contrast of subject and object endures, to wit, as long as we enjoy our five senses and no more, and do not know how to divorce our all-perceiving ego, the higher self, from the thraldom of these senses, so long will it be impossible for the personal ego to break through the barrier which separates it from a knowledge of things in themselves, or substance. That ego, progressing in an arc of ascending subjectivity, must exhaust the experience of every plane. That is an assumption that you are making. It is not necessarily guaranteed that you have to go through every experience on every plane. Once again, I do not even disagree with it, right? It is literally part of my theory of spiritual evolution that we assimilate the lesser into us for the experience thereof, right? And so the experience of an atom is absorbed by the plant. The experience of the plant is absorbed by the animals, and the experience of the animals is absorbed by us. That is part of this, but again, that is speculative. That is something that I even believe, but we must remember that it is speculation. But not till the unit is merged in the all, whether on this or any other plane, the subject and object alike vanish in the absolute negation of the nirvanic state. Negation, again, only from our plane, is scaled to that peak of omniscience, the knowledge of things in themselves, and the solution of the yet more awful riddle approached, before which even the highest dying Kohan must bow in silence and ignorance, the unspeakable mystery of that which is called by the Vedantins the Parabrahman. Therefore, such being the case, all those who sought to give a name to the incognizable principle have simply degraded it. Even to speak of cosmic ideation, save in its phenomenal aspect, is like trying to bottle up primordial chaos, or to put a printed label on eternity. What then is the primordial substance, that mysterious object of which alchemy was ever talking and which became the subject of philosophical speculation in every age? What can it be, finally, even in its phenomenal pre-differentiation? Even that is all is manifested in nature, and nothing to our senses. It is mentioned under various names in every cosmogony, referred to in every philosophy, and shown to be, to this day, the grasp-eluding Proteus in nature. We touch and do not feel it. We look at it without seeing it. We breathe it and do not perceive it. We hear and smell it without the smallest cognition that it is here. For it is in every molecule of that which in our illusion and ignorance we regard as matter in any of its states, or conceive as a feeling, a thought, an emotion. In short, it is the upadi, or vehicle, of every possible phenomenon, whether physical, mental, or psychic. In the opening sentences of Genesis, as in the Chaldean cosmogony, in the Puranas of India and the Book of the Dead of Egypt, it opens everywhere in the cycle of manifestation. It is termed chaos, and the face of the waters, incubated by the Spirit, proceeding from the unknown, under whatever name. See chaos, theos, cosmos. Now, I believe that this is the plasma, right? We briefly hit plasma, we'll briefly hit it again. Plasma is, to me, the ideation of the spirit, right? The spirit in plasma is electromagnetic harmonics. The way that you can experience plasma in a realistic way, like you could do like Ben Franklin and go out and attempt to capture lightning, because lightning is an expression of plasma. It is a change of polarity in a visible manner. The same is true of fire. This is plasma. This is matter changing from one state into another. It is going from a gas and being combusted into a different gas. That is a visible sign of a chemical change. That is plasma in an activated state. Inside of here is butane, and butane is plasma just as much as all of the air around us is plasma, right? The invisible, encompassing miasma through which we move is plasma. Space is plasma. You can see the differentiation of active and inactive plasma, which is the two states that it has. In active, it is visible. In inactive, it is not. I can take this lighter and I can just hit the little red thing right here and gas comes out, but nothing is happening. There is no catalyst of change. The flint ignites it and that becomes the change. The change is visible plasma, right? It's not the end result. The end result's not fire. It's the exhaust. It is the changing from butane to, I'm not even sure what the chemical process, what it becomes, but it goes from what it is to what it will be. The process by which it happens is plasma becoming activated. That is just as true inside of you. When you take a breath and your lungs take the oxygen out of that and exchange it for carbon dioxide from your cells, that is a plasmic exchange. It is facilitated by electricity. When you make a decision to wiggle your fingers, a current runs from your brain down through your limbs into your fingers and causes it to move. That is plasma in action, even though it is not visible. Right? It is contained within us, so therefore we can't see it. But we do know that there is an electric charge there. We do know that the electric charge runs along the nerve systems. We know that this electricity happens. That is the plasmic change from substance or from no substance to substance. The spirit is the part that allows that to happen. The plasmic differentiation allows that to happen. And again, that is speculative. That is my speculation based upon science that I have investigated. I could be wrong, but it does seem to bear out through logical deductions, and I spend an awful lot of time trying to prove myself wrong. More than I ever talk about how anybody else is wrong, I choose to try to invalidate myself first. right? You are more than welcome to do the same thing. If I am wrong, let me know. Put it in the comments. Give me a good reason to investigate it, and I'll check it out. And if I am wrong, I will publicly admit it, right? I am just as willing to take correction as I am to give it. The authors of the sacred scriptures in India go deeper into the origin of things evolved than Thales or Job, for they say, from intelligence, called Mahat in the Puranas, associated with ignorance, Iswar as a personal deity, attended by its protective power, in which the quality of dullness, tamas, insensibility, predominates, proceeds, ether, from ether, air, from air, heat, from heat, water, and from water, earth, with everything on it. From this same self was the ether produced, says the Veda. Now I'm gonna differentiate here. This right here, that is the ether. Heat, just as much as the light from this lighter, right? It puts off heat. That is an external reaction of the chemical change happening in the plasmic state, right? There is heat all around us. We absorb it from many places, but you can't make anything cold, right? You can remove heat from it, but you cannot add cold to something. Heat is the change. Whether that is change we are getting from the sun, or whether that is the change that is created when we exercise our muscles, heat is created from the change. So it doesn't go from air to heat, right? Heat changes the air. From ether to air, sure, that is perfectly acceptable to me, right? Water, heat, air. Right? That is very simplified, I understand that. But air, heat, from heat, water, not as much, right? By removing the heat from the air, the plasmic change from the air, you condense the water, right? That is not from heat water, but rather taking heat, making water. Can be considered nitpicking, right? But nitpicking is where it's at. It makes a difference. It becomes thus evident that it is not this ether, sprung at the fourth remove from the emanation of intelligence, associated with ignorance, which is the high principle, the deific entity worshipped by the Greeks and Latins under the name of Pater Omnipotens Ether and Magnus Ether in its collective aggregates. Like, there's a reason why fire is worshipped, right? There is a reason why Zoroastrianism is a thing, and the various other sun cults, right? And that's not to put Zoroastrianism in a cult, but there is a reason for that. It is because the plasmic change is the ideation of, right? That is literally a visible ether. The septenary gradation and the innumerable subdivisions and differences made by the ancients between the powers of ether, collectively, from its outward fringe of effects, with which our science is so familiar, up to the imponderable substance, once admitted as the ether of space, now about to be rejected, has been ever a vexing riddle for every branch of knowledge. The mythologist and symbologist of our day, confused by this incomprehensible glorification on the one hand, and the degradation on the other, of the same deified entity and in the same religious systems, are often driven to the most ludicrous mistakes. The Church, firm as a rock in each and all of her early eras of interpretation, has made of ether the abode of her satanic legions. That is hilarious. Footnote. For it is thus that the Church has interpreted verse 12 in the 6th chapter to the Ephesians. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Further on, St. Paul mentions the spiritual malices, wickedness in English text, spread in the air. Spiritualia nesquitiae coelestibus. The Latin text given various names to these malices, the innocent elementals. But the Church is right this time, though wrong in calling them all devils. The astral light, or lower ether, is full of consciousness and semi-conscious and unconscious entities. Only the church has less power over them than over invisible microbes or mosquitoes. The whole hierarchy of the fallen angels is there. The cosmocratores, or the world bearers, according to Bossuet, mundi tenentes, the world holders, as Tertullian calls them, and mundi domini, world dominations, or rather dominators, the corbati, or curved, etc., who thus make of the stars and celestial orbs in their course devils. The difference made between these 7 states of ether, itself one of these 7 cosmic principles, while the ether of the ancients is universal fire, may be seen in the injunctions by Zoroaster and Paracelsus, respectively. The former said, "Consult it only when it is without form or figure, absque forma et figura," which means without flames or burning coals. When it has a form, heed it not, teaches Paracelsus, but when it is formless, obey it, for it is then the sacred fire, and all it will reveal thee shall be true. There is a footnote. Effectium Oracles of Zoroaster. This proves that ether, itself an aspect of Akasa, has in its turn several aspects or principles. That does not necessarily prove that, right? And again, it is something that I hold, but somebody saying it is not proof, right? Somebody speculating upon it is not proof, right? You can talk about these 7 states of ether, but there's no real clear linear definition of what ether actually is, right? So anything that you are speculating the differentiation of necessarily is going to be speculation. Now, when he is talking about this, that is more talking about the plasma before the change, right? The light, the fire, the change, the spirit, all of these are the same thing. But it is change in its active state, right? What you are meant by Zoroaster here to do, consult it only when it is without form or figure, means to contemplate that before the change. What is the primary behind the before the change? If I take this, like we just did, and contemplate the butane and the fact that if I strike it, there will be fire, right? That is what he's talking about. Literally going to the source and trying to understand that. It is the same, right? It is the same from Paracelsus, right? When it is formless, obey it, right? That is the understanding of the before the change, right? The fire is the visible form of the change. There is an after effect of the change, and there is a before the change. What they are telling you to do here is to understand the before the change. Now, whether they had the full understanding of it or not is debatable, right? But at least they understood what was going on, right? Probably better than other people. All the ancient nations deified ether in its imponderable aspect and potency. Virgil calls Jupiter Pater Omnipotens Aether, the great ether. Now see, that is not going to be correct. Georgica Book 2, right? While ether does permeate everything, the expression of ether is not some planet just sitting there, right? Even the sun itself is not a really good interpretation of the plasmic, right? I hold, this pure speculation, that the sun is an emanation point of energies transferred from elsewhere. Now, the exact mechanics of that, I am not a physicist. I haven't sat down and done the mathematics of it. But you can see, once again, the Thunderbolts project. In space, you can see the interaction between this star and that star, right? You can see like a thread that runs between them that lightens up, right? That is the plasmic exchange. The sun is more of a result of that. That's the flame and not the source. The Hindus have also placed it among their deities under the name of Akasa, the synthesis of ether, and the author of Homeomerian System of Philosophy, Anaxagoras of Clazomene, firmly believed that the spiritual prototypes of all things, as well as their elements, were to be found in the boundless ether where they were generated, whence they evolved, and whither they returned, an occult teaching. Right, and what I hold is that the plasma is literally every single molecule in existence, including all of the ones that make up you. They are held together by the magnetic centers, which are your chakras, and they each function in different ways, right? Your digestive system works a little bit differently than your circulatory system, which works differently than your reproductive systems. All of those are governed in different ways by different points of view. But you have evolved from the ether, right? The magnetic points that you have through the design and the intention of the divine, right? You are here by the express will of the divine, and he assigns the magnetic points which pull together the atoms which you need to exist. So you are evolved from the plasma. You are part of the plasma because all of the pieces that are in you can change. If you don't believe that, look back to the witch trials, right? They definitely changed the plasma on some people. That is a possibility. That is something that can happen even if it is not an active state. And once again, when you make a decision to wiggle your fingers, you don't actually make that happen. The Holy Spirit does. The electromagnetic harmonics of the universe sends a signal from your deciding point to the point of return. Right? You have an electrical charge that emanates. That is literally plasma in action. That is the plasma inside of you in action. You can activate the plasma outside of you too. There's the kind of things that we talk about over there. It thus becomes clear that it is from ether in its highest synthetic aspect, once anthropomorphized, that sprung the first idea of a personal creative deity. With the philosophical Hindus, the elements are tamas, an example, unenlightened by intellect, which they obscure. We have now to exhaust the question of the mystical meaning of primordial chaos and of the root principle, and show how they were connected in the ancient philosophies with Akasa, wrongly translated ether, and also with Maya, illusion, of which Iswara is the male aspect. We shall speak further on of the intelligent principle, or rather, of the invisible immaterial properties in the visible and material elements that sprung from the primordial chaos. 4. What is the primordial chaos but ether? It is asked in Isis Unveiled. Not the modern ether, not such as is recognized now, but such as was known to the ancient philosophers long before the time of Moses. But ether, with all its mysterious and occult properties, containing in itself the germs of universal creation. Upper ether, or Akasa, is the celestial virgin, and mother of every existing form and being, from whose bosom, as soon as incubated by the divine spirit, are called into existence matter and life, force and action. Ether is the Aditi of the Hindus, and it is Akasa. Electricity, magnetism, heat, light, and chemical attraction are so little understood, even now, that fresh facts are constantly widening the range of our knowledge. Who knows where the power of the protean giant, ether, or whence its mysterious origin? Who, we mean, that denies the spirit that works in it and evolves out of it all visible forms. I believe that electricity, magnetism, heat, light, and chemical action are all plasma. It will be an easy task to show the cosmogonical legends all over the world are based on a knowledge by the ancients of those sciences, which have allied themselves in our days in support of the doctrine of evolution, and that further research may demonstrate that those ancients were far better acquainted with the fact of evolution itself, embracing both its physical and spiritual aspects, than we are now. With the old philosophers, evolution was a universal theorem, a doctrine embracing the whole and an established principle, while our modern evolutionists are enabled to present us merely with the speculative theoretics, with particular, if not wholly negative theorems. It is idle for the representatives of our modern wisdom to close the debate and pretend that the question is settled, merely because the obscure phraseology of the Mosaic, far later, account clashes with the definite exegesis of exact science. Now, I have said many times, and I will say many more times, that microevolution works, differentiation within the species, but macroevolution does not, the change from one species to another. We have zero evidence of this actually taking place, right? If evolution was as proposed by the Darwinians, we would still have man-apes coming out of the jungle, right? It would be a necessity, like even if it was not the exact iteration of us, there would be more civilization that would have happened in the last 6,000 years than has happened, right? More peoples would have become a thing. There is no biological imperative for a human to lose the covering of hair that we would have had as apes, right? There's no biological imperative for that, for the removal of the hair, which was a protective layer against the elements, and to replace it with a synthetic. There is no biological imperative for that. There are many examples of how biology could not have evolved, right? A giraffe is a great one because the giraffe has a very long neck, and in order to get its blood flow all the way to the top of the neck, it has to have a heart that is extremely strong. And the extreme strength of its heart presents a problem, right? At some point it has to drink water, and water is almost always going to be below its feet, right? At least below its knees if it's wading out in the water. And so it has to lower its head. Well, when you lower your head and you've got a jet pump pushing up, well, gravity works different when your head is down, and the required force to get the blood up to the brain of the giraffe, if it goes down, would blow the brain of the giraffe into jelly. And so there's a little switch, a little valve inside of its heart, and when its head gets to a certain point, that valve clicks over and it does not force as much force. By the time you get to the point where you need that valve, it's too late. You've already died. And so, again, biology cannot account for that, right? The natural progression from a short-necked animal into the long-necked animal is not going to make sense. On top of that, if you go all the way back, right, and the first fish struggles its way out of the water, and it's like, hey, check it out, I can breathe air. What are the chances? What are the chances that at the exact same time frame, there are two fish that walk out of the water at the same time, right? Just randomly mutate into a species. And they're identical enough to where that they can mate and produce an offspring. What are the odds of that? What are the odds of that happening in a geographical location so close that they can find each other? What are the odds of that? It is much more likely that life is intentional, that it has been designed. Who designed it? Who knows? It could be entirely the will of the Creator, which is what I believe. It could be the interference of some other creatures from somewhere else, which is what other people believe, the ancient aliens. Whether or not those aliens were working at the direct of the Creator, also up for debate. But what's not up for debate is that it is extremely unlikely that those circumstances would be met. It is extremely unlikely that, in the case of the giraffe, you would develop the valve before you needed it. So microevolution, right? Microevolution is development within the species. That is us being able to create phones and cameras. That is microevolution. It is built upon the knowledge that is already past. You can see that happening in the forests, right? Gorillas learning to use tools. That is a thing. They throw rocks. They use sticks to solve problems. That is within their species, though. They are not becoming another species by learning these tools, right? They were evolving within their species. They're not changing their physiognomy. They're not losing their hair. right? They're not developing new valves and new organs. They're learning something new based upon experience of the past. That's microevolution. That is development within the species. And that is even possible for some small genetic changes, right? Such as a bird developing a longer beak over a period of time. Now, that does not happen right away, right? It slowly starts going for other things and somehow keys itself genetically to make a little bit longer of a nose, right? Or the animal with a longer nose genetically, right? We have people that have a little bit longer nose, a little bit shorter nose. Well, if everybody who had a longer nose were the ones that were able to get food more successfully, those genetic traits would enhance over time. We see that with dogs and chickens and things that we intentionally genetically manipulate through natural selection. We breed for traits. That's microevolution, right? You're not changing it from a fish to a bird. You're changing it from this type of bird into a new type of bird that evolved because having a longer nose allowed you to get better food, and therefore you survived. All right, back to the text. If one turns to the laws or ordinances of Manu, one finds the prototype of all these ideas, merely lost to the Western world in their original form, disfigured by later interpolations and additions. They have, nevertheless, preserved quite enough of their ancient spirit to show its character. Removing the darkness, the self-existent Lord, Vishnu Narayana, becoming manifest and wishing to produce beings from his essence, created in the beginning, water alone. In that he cast seed that became a golden egg. Whence this self-existent Lord? It is called this, and is spoken of as darkness, imperceptible without definite qualities, undiscoverable as if wholly in sleep. Having dwelt in that egg for a whole divine year, he, who is called in the world Brahma, splits the egg in two, and from the upper portion he forms the heaven, and from the lower the earth, and from the middle the sky and the perpetual place of waters. And that is just as likely a speculation as any other. But there is, directly following these verses, something more important for us, as it corroborates entirely our esoteric teachings. From verse 14 to 36, evolution is given in the order described in the esoteric philosophy. This cannot be easily gainsaid. In even Hatiti, the son of Viraswamin, and the author of the commentary, the Manubhasaya, whose date, according to the Western Orientalist, is 1000 A.D., helps us with his remarks into the elucidation of the truth. He showed himself either unwilling to give out more, because he knew that the truth which has to be kept from the profane, or else he was really puzzled. Still, what he does give out makes out the septenary principle in men and nature plain enough. Let us begin with Chapter 1 of the Ordinances or Laws. After the self-existent Lord, the unmanifesting logos of the unknown darkness, becomes manifested in the golden egg. It is from this egg, from 11, that which is the undiscrete, undifferentiated cause, eternal, which is and is not. From it issued that male who is called in the world Brahma. Here we find, as in all genuine philosophical systems, even the egg, or the circle, or zero, boundless infinity, referred to as it, and Brahma. We have a footnote on it. The ideal apex of the Pythagorean triangle. See Vitae sections in Volume 2, Cross and Circle, and the earliest symbolics of the cross. Referred to as it and Brahma, the first unit only, referred to as the male god. In example, the fructifying principle, it is a circle with a vertical line, or 10, the decade. On the plane of the septenary, or our world, only, it is called Brahma. On that of the unified decade in the realm of the reality, this male Brahma is an illusion. 14. From self, Atmana, he created mind, 1, which is and is not, 2, and from mind egoism, self-consciousness, the ruler, 3, the Lord. 1. The mind is manas, med haitite, tai. The th is t, so med hatita. The commentator, I'm sorry if I mess up these names again. It's not my natural language. I've never even heard these things spoken aloud. I am trying to do the best I can. The commentator, justly observes here that it is the reverse of this and shows already interpolation and rearranging. For it is manas that springs from ahamkara, or universal self-consciousness, as manas in the microcosm springs from mahat, or mahabuddhi, buddhi in man. For manas is dual, and as shown and translated by Colebrook, is serving both for sense and action, is an organ by affinity, being cognate with the rest. The rest means, here, that manas, or fifth principle, the fifth because the body was named the first, which is the reverse of the true philosophical order. Footnote. Vide A. Coke Burnell's translation, edited by Ed W. Hopkins. The true philosophical order is in affinity with the Atma Buddhi and with the lower four principles, hence our teaching, namely that manas follows Atma Buddhi to Devakan, and that the lower dregs, the residue of manas, remains with Kamarupa in Limbus, or Kamaloka, the abode of the shells. 2. Such is the meaning of manas, which is and is not. 3. Medhatite translates it as the one conscious of the I, or ego, not ruler, as the Orientalists do. Thus they translate verse 16. He also, having made these subtile parts of those six, the great shelf and the 5 organs of sense, of unmeasured brightness, to enter into the elements of self, Admamatrasu, created all beings. When, according to Medhatiti, ought to read the Matratit instead of Admanmantarasu, and thus be made to say, he, having pervaded the subtile parts of those 6 of unmeasured brightness, by elements of self, created all beings. This latter reading must be the correct one, since he, the self, is what we call Atma, and thus constitutes the 7th principle, the synthesis of the 6. Such is also the opinion of the editor of Manava Dharma Shastra, who seems to have intuitionally entered far deeper into the spirit of philosophy than has the translator of the Ordinances of Manu, the late Dr. Burnell. For he hesitates little between the text of Kalukua and the commentaries of Medhatiti, rejecting the Tanmatra, or subtile elements, the Atmamatrasu of Kalukua. He says, applying the principles to the cosmic self, the 6 appear rather to be the manas, plus the 5 principles of ether, air, fire, water, and earth. A while ago there were 7 principles of ether. Having united 5 portions of these 6 with the spiritual element, the 7th, he thus created all living things, all existing things. Atmamatara is therefore the spiritual atom as opposed to the elementary, not reflective elements of himself. Thus, he corrects the translation of verse 17. As the subtle elements of bodily forms, this depends on these 6. So, the wise call his form Karira, Sharira, and he says that elements mean here portions or parts or principles, which reading is borne out by verse 19, which says, 19. This non-eternal universe arises from the eternal by means of the subtile elements of form of those 7 very glorious principles, Purusha. Commenting upon which, according to the Medhatiti, the editor remarks that The 5 elements plus mind, manas, and self-consciousness, ahamkara, are meant. There is a footnote on ahamkara. Ahamkara is universal self-consciousness, has a triple aspect, as also manas. For the conception of I, or one's ego, is either sattva, pure quietude, or appears as rajas, active, or remains tamas, stagnant, in darkness. It belongs to heaven and earth and assumes the properties of either. Self-consciousness are meant. Subtile elements, as before, meaning 5 portions of form or principles. For verse 20 shows it when saying of these 5 elements or 5 portions of form, rupa plus manas and self-consciousness, that they constitute the 7 purusha or principles, called in the Puranas the 7 prakritis. Moreover, these 5 elements or 5 portions are spoken of in verse 27 as those which are called the atomic destructible portions, therefore distinct from the atoms of the Nyaya. This creative Brahma, issuing from the mundane or golden egg, unites in himself both the male and the female principles. He is, in short, the same as all the creative protologoi. Of Brahma, however, it could not be said, as of Dionysos, protogonon, daphiu trigonon, bakirion, hanakta, hagirion, auratan, krufion, de kerota dimorphon, a lunar Jehovah, Bacchus truly, with David dancing nude before his symbol in the ark, because no licentious Dionysia were ever established in his name or honor. All such public worship was exoteric, and the great universal symbols were distorted, universally, as those of Krishna are now by the Vallabhacharya's of Bombay, the followers of the infant god. But are these popular gods the true deity? Are they the apex and synthesis of the sevenfold creation, man included? Never. Each and all are one of the rungs of that septenary ladder of divine consciousness, pagan as Christian. For Ein Sof also is said to manifest through the 7 letters of Jehovah's name, who, having usurped the place of the unknown limitless, was given by his devotees his 7 angels of the presence, his 7 principles. Yet they are mentioned in almost every school. In the pure Sankhya philosophy, Mahat, Ahamkara, and the 5 Tanmantras are called the 7 Prakritis, or natures, and they are counted from Mada Buddhi, or Mahat, down to earth. Alright, we're going to pause just for a second and talk about this. I have a video called The 7 Facets of God, something along that nature, and it is a Bible study, right? It is one we did before the unconventional Bible study. And it kind of led into the Bible study because I learned something new, right? And I love learning new things, and I integrate it. And the thing that I learned was that there was a point where in the Bible they were talking about the 7 facets of God. And that breaks down to the 7 sins and the 7 virtues, right? Which are a sliding scale of each other, right? Lust and chastity, sliding scale. Greed and charity, sliding scale. Those are really 7, which are 14, because there is an extreme on either end, but they are 7 principles, with the examples being greed and charity, right? And so the reason that I'm pointing this out is because it seems to fit right here, right? When it says that Ein Sof is said to manifest through the 7 letters, I ain't worried about the letters, but given by his devotees the 7 angels of his presence, his 7 principles, and they are mentioned in almost every school. To me, that is probably going to indicate those, right, the virtues and the vices. I have a whole video on those, right, and how I came to that, and it's not quite as clear as I do things these days because I was still learning a lot back then. But it is a fairly good representation of what I'm talking about. Nevertheless, however disfigured for rabbinical purposes in the original Elohistic version by Ezra, however repulsive at times even the esoteric meaning in the Hebrew scrolls, which is far more so than its outward veil or cloaking may be. Let's check out the footnote. See the Holy of Holies. Once the Jehovistic portions are eliminated, the Mosaic books are found full of purely occult and priceless knowledge, especially in the first 6 chapters. Read by the aid of the Kabbalah, one finds a matchless temple of occult truths, a well of deeply concealed beauty hidden under a structure, the visible architecture of which, its apparent symmetry notwithstanding, is unable to stand the criticism of cold reason, or to reveal its age, for it belongs to all the ages. There is more wisdom concealed under the exoteric fables of Puranas and Bible than in all the exoteric facts and science and the literature of the world, and more occult true science than there is of exact knowledge in all the academies. Or, in plainer and stronger language, there is as much esoteric wisdom in some portions of the exoteric Puranas and Pentateuch as there is of nonsense and designed childish fancy in it, when read only in the dead-letter murderous interpretations of great dogmatic religions, and especially of sects. Let anyone read the first verses of chapter 1 of Genesis and reflect upon them. There, God commands to another God who does his bidding, even in the cautious English Protestant translation of James the First's authorized edition. In the beginning, the Hebrew language, having no word to express the idea of eternity, footnote, the word eternity, by which Christian theologians interpret the term forever and ever, does not exist in the Hebrew tongue, either as a word or meaning. Ulam, says Leclerc, only imports a time when beginning or end is not known. It does not mean infinite duration, for the word forever in the Old Testament only signifies a long time, nor is the term eternity used in the Christian sense in the Puranas. For in Vishnu Purana it is clearly stated that by eternity and mortality only existence to the end of the kalpa is meant. God fashions the heaven and the earth, and the latter is without form and void, while the former is no heaven in fact, but the deep chaos, with darkness upon its face. Footnote. Orphic theogony is purely Oriental and Indian in its spirit. The successive transformations it has undergone have now separated it widely from the spirit of ancient cosmogony, as may be seen by comparing it even with Hesiod's theogony. Yet the truly Aryan Hindu spirit breaks forth everywhere in both Hesiod's and the Orphic theogony. See the remarkable works of James Darmestaster, Cosmogonies Ariens, in his Essays Oriento. Thus, the original Greek conception of chaos is that of the secret wisdom religion. In Hesiod, therefore, chaos is infinite, boundless, endless, and beginningless in duration, an abstraction at the same time as a visible presence, space, filled with darkness, which is primordial matter in its pre-cosmic state. For in its etymological sense, chaos is space, according to Aristotle, and space is the ever unseen and unknowable deity in our philosophy. See the Holy Spirit. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, or the great deep of the infinite space, and this Spirit is Narayana, or Vishnu. It doesn't matter what you call it. To me, that is going to be the Holy Spirit, or the electromagnetic forces of creation, plasma in short. And God said, let there be a firmament, verse 6, and God, the second, obeyed and made the firmament. That is not what it says. I have done a video on this. It is the I am video, which is leading into manifestation, because this statement was, I am the firmament, right? God said, I am light. And there was light, and it was good. And it was good is also the I am. The statement is Hoya, which is I am. I am, the double positive there. And that double positive is I am the light. I am the darkness. I am the waters. I am everything he created. Anytime you hear let there be, it was I am. That's how it actually reads. Do the word study and it will tell you. God said, let there be light. I am the light. That is how it reads, according to the ancients, like the actual literal translation of the words. And so it was not God speaking to another God. It was God saying, I am, and it became literally plasma in action, right? The Holy Spirit enacting creation. Now, again, that is my belief. That is what I hold to be true from reading the thing, right? When the whole reason we did the Bible study, the unconventional Bible study, was to look at things like that, to do word studies and see what it actually means. And we did, right? Right at the beginning, right in Genesis, we saw how you were deceived. And God said, let there be a firmament. And God, the second, obeyed and made the firmament. It is not biblical. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. I am light, and there was light. Now the latter does not mean light at all. But in the Kabbalah, the androgyne Adam Kadmon, or Sephira, spiritual light, for they are one. Or, according to the Chaldean book of Numbers, the secondary angels, the first being the Elohim, who are the aggregate of that fashioning God. For to whom are those words of command addressed? To reality itself. And whom is it who commands? The creator of reality, the Holy Spirit. That which commands is the eternal law, yes, and he obeys the Elohim, the known quantity, acting in and with X, or the coefficient of the unknown quantity, the forces of the one force. All this is occultism, and is found in the archaic stanzas. It is perfectly immaterial whether we call these forces the Dayan Kohans or the Ophanim, as St. John does. Now, I want to point out the caveat, right, that there are two accounts of creation in Genesis. The first one is the I am account, and the second one have the Elohim, who say, let us make man in our image, right? That is two completely separate accounts that do not really even bear with each other in large part, right? They contradict each other. Again, I refer you to Genesis. All right. The one universal light, which to man is darkness, is ever existent, says the Chaldean book of Numbers. From it proceeds periodically the energy, which is reflected in the deep, or chaos, the storehouse of future worlds, and once awakened, stirs up and fructifies the latent forces, which are the ever-present eternal potentialities in it. Then awake the new Brahmas and Buddhas, the co-eternal forces, and a new universe springs into being. That is some good speculation. In the Sefer Jazira, the Kabbalistic book of creation, the author has evidently repeated the words of Manu. In it, the divine substance is represented as having alone existed from the eternity. That would be the Holy Spirit, boundless and absolute, and as having emitted from itself the Spirit. Right. The manifested Spirit, absolute divine Spirit, is one with the absolute divine substance. Parabrahm and Mula Prakriti are one in essence. Therefore, cosmic ideation and cosmic substance in their primal character are one also. The differentiation between God, the all-present omniscient creator, and the Holy Spirit, which is the physical manifestation of that idealized concept of God, are the same to me, right? The will of God is that the universe exists, and the way that it happens is through the Spirit, but the Spirit is literally God, right? It is Him in action. It is making the now turn into the next. And so this is not opposed to what I believe. It's just stated a little bit differently, right? I do not see the Spirit as separate at all from the divine. It is part of the divine, like entirely. One is the Spirit of the living God, blessed be its name, which liveth forever, voice, spirit, and word. This is the Holy Spirit. Footnote. Sefer Jazira, chapter 1, Mishnah 9. And this is the Kabbalistic abstract Trinity, so unceremoniously anthropomorphized by the Christian fathers. From this triple one emanated the whole cosmos. First, from one emanated the number 2, or air, the Father, the creative element, and then, number 3, water, the mother, proceeded from the air. Ether, or fire, completes the mystic four, the Arabil. Footnote, and we will come back. Right. Ibid, it is from Arba that Abram is made to come. That is possible, but I'm gonna differentiate here in that from one would have to emanate the plasma first, because there is no change without the plasmic element. Without the electroharmonics, there is no water. There is no air. It is literally undifferentiated until there is the change. There is the fullness of the all, which is every single particle, but it is not differentiated into air or water. Right? It is not in a recognizable, cognizable state. And so in order for that to happen, for me, fire is going to have to be there first. Before air, before earth, before water, there has to be plasma. There has to be the fire. It has to be. Right? That is the only way that it can possibly work. Without the electromagnetic change of chemical interaction or plasmic change of form, which is fire, like we talked about. Without that, there is none, right? There is no differentiation. So, to me, this is going to be incorrect simply because it's in the wrong order. Now, if this was changed and ether was first, we would be fine. Because to me, ether and one is going to be the same, right? Ether is literally all as one. The differentiation begins at 2, which is the separation, but that is a function of the plasma. It is a function of the ether. It is a function of the fohat. It is a function of the electromagnetic forces of creation. Without it, there is nothing. From it comes all things. When the concealed of the concealed wanted to reveal himself, he first made a point, primordial point, or the first Sephiroth, air or Holy Ghost, shaped into a sacred form, the 10 Sephiroth, or the heavenly man. And again, the 10 Sephiroth is an interpretation of things. I do not necessarily hold that that is a truth in the way that other people do in the occult world. And covered it with a rich and splendid garment that is the world. Footnote, Zohar 1:2a. It is not just the world, but it is literally everything, everywhere. He maketh the wind his messengers, flaming fire his servants, says the Jazira, showing the cosmical character of the later ehumerized elements. Footnote. Sefer Jazira, Mishnah 9:10. Everywhere throughout the Acts, Paul calls the invisible cosmic beings the elements. See Greek text. But now the elements are degraded into and limited to atoms of which nothing is known, so far, and which are only children of necessity, as ether is too. As we said in Isis, the poor primordial elements have long been exiled, and our ambitious physicists run races to determine who shall add one more to the fledgling brood of the 60 and odd elementary substances. We have several more of them now. Meanwhile, there rages a war in modern chemistry about terms. We are denied the right to call these substances chemical elements, for they are not the primordial principles of self-existing essences out of which the universe was fashioned, according to Plato. Such ideas, associated with the word element, were good enough for the old Greek philosophy, but modern science rejects them, for, as Professor Crook says, they are unfortunate terms. And experimental science will have nothing to do with any kind of essences except those which we can see, smell, or taste. It leaves others to the metaphysicians. We must feel grateful even for so much. The later A humorized elements, and that the spirit permeates every atom in cosmos. This primordial substance is called by some chaos. Plato and the Pythagoreans named it the soul of the world, after it had been impregnated by the spirit of that which broods over the primeval waters, or chaos. So the change agent would be what? Spirit, or what? Plasma. It is by being reflected in it, say the Kabbalists, that the brooding principle created the phantasmagoria of a visible manifested universe. Chaos before, ether after. The reflection, it is still the deity that pervades all space and all things. That is what I'm at. It is the invisible, imponderable spirit of things and the invisible but too tangible fluid that radiates from the fingers of the healthy magnetizer. For it is vital electricity, life itself. That again is closer to what I believe, right? I believe in the manipulation of the electromagnetic forces of creation. I literally do that, right? I have trackable results from doing so. It's not just in my mind, right? I can do things that I could not because I have healed myself. That is through the will of God, so don't ever get it twisted, but it is literally me directing the energies that have enabled the healing to happen. And yes, I do believe that it is magnetic and that it is vital electricity, life itself even. Called in derision by the Marquis de Merville, the nebulous almighty, it is termed by the theurgists and occultists to this day the living fire. And there is not a Hindu who practices at dawn a certain kind of meditation, but knows its effects. Footnote. Writing upon this subject in Isis Unveiled, we said of it that it was the chaos of the ancients, the Zoroastrian sacred fire, or the Atash Bahram of the Parsis, the Hermes fire, the Elmes fire of the ancient Germans, the lightning of Cybele, the burning torch of Apollo, the flame on the altar of Pan, the inextinguishable fire in the temple on the Acropolis and in that of Vesta, the fire flame of Pluto's helm, the brilliant sparks on the hats of the Dioscuri, on the Gorgon head, the helm of Pallas, the staff of Mercury, the Egyptian Pathara, the Grecian Zeus Catiabates, the descending of Pausanias, the Pentecostal fire tongues, the burning bush of Moses, the pillar of fire of the Exodus, and the burning lamp of Abram, the eternal fire of the bottomless pit, the Delphic or oracular vapors, the sidereal light of the Rosicrucians, the Akasa of the Hindu adepts, the astral light of Eliphas Levi, the nerve aura and the fluid of the magnetists, the odd of the Reichenbach, the psychod and the actinic force of theory, the psychic force of Sergeant Cox, and the atmospheric magnetism of some naturalist, galvanism, and finally electricity. All these are but various names for many different manifestations or effects of the same mysterious, all-pervading cause, the Greek archaeus. We now add, it is all this and much more, and that again is exactly what I believe. Right? All of those things were actually the plasma. And I just use different terminology. It is like the conceptualization is the same. It is the spirit of light and Magnes, as truly expressed by an opponent. Magnus, Magus, and Magnes are two branches growing from the same trunk and shooting forth the same resultants. And in the appellation of living fire, we may also discover the meaning of the puzzling sentence in the Zend Avesta that saying that there is a fire that gives knowledge of the future, science, and amiable speech. True. An example develops an extraordinary eloquence in the civil, the sensitive, and even some orators. This fire is spoken of in all the Hindu books, as also in the Kabbalistic works. The Zohar explains it as the white hidden fire in the Resha Trivara, the whitehead, whose will causes the fiery fluid to flow in 370 currents in every direction of the universe. It is identical with, and that would be toroidal flow, right? We talk quite often about the toroids as well, because toroids seem to be the manifestation of reality. Now, we can take that to a microcosmic level, down to the individualized atom, by which electricity emanates in all directions from the electron. We can see it in the solar system expressed in the same way. And so it seems to be a fundamental thing. My estimation is there's probably not black holes. There is a return point and an emanation point of the toroid, right? That can be a variable location and a variable direction, because a toroid emits in all directions at the same time. No matter which direction you go, there is an emission, and there is an absorption in all directions as well. If you look at magnetics, which we have done a video on, like what magnetics look like, you can take iron fillings and see, but it forms a toroid. I believe that toroid is the fundamental shape by which reality is created, right? The dipoles are directly related to the toroidal emanations of the individualized atoms. You, when you speak, create a toroid. The air comes out of your mouth, and you would think it would be a cone, but it's not. Somebody sitting over here, they can hear you talk. Somebody sitting behind you, they can hear you talk. That is because it comes out, and your tongue separates the flow into a toroid, which encompasses you completely. It is identical with the serpent that runs with 370 leaps. Now, whether or not there are 370 emanation and return points, that is up for debate, right? But it's just as likely a number as anything else. I am sure they spent plenty of time trying to figure it out. But again, it is not all that important in the long scope of things, right? Understanding that all points emanate and all points return is much more important than knowing whether it is 370 or 400,000, right? It is much more important to know that the concept exists than it is to truly define the end point of the concept. Serpent that runs with 370 leaps of the Sephara Designatua, which, when the perfect man, the Metatron, is raised, an example, when the divine man indwells in the animal man, it, the serpent, becomes three spirits. That is to say, the Atma Buddhi Manas, in our theosophical phraseology. Okay, so this again we're going to talk about, right? Three, where are we going to get three from, right? We have the Trinity, right? The temple of God, the divine separation, right? You as the individualized piece of God making the decisions for the temple, and the Holy Spirit. But you also have the separation within yourself of the three. You have the three upper chakras, you have the three lower chakras, which meld through the third central point into one, right? So those three spirits become one. That is this. As above, so below. We talk about that all of the time. If you are in alignment with your spiritual, which is the throat to the crown, and with your earthly, which is the solar plexus to the base, or vice versa, and you come into alignment between those two, as above, so below, and you bring it into your heart, that's where manifestation comes from. That is literally the point of the terminology as far as I am concerned. This is another expression of that, right? The three spirits, right? When it is raised, when the divine man indwells in the animal man, so that would be the spiritual and the animal, the serpent or the energy becomes three spirits. Now, what is that? You have the white, penetrative masculine energy, and you have the black, receptive, feminine energy. Those are two energies, and the two melded into one, once again, form reality. So, I don't disagree with this, right? The terminology may be different, but the concept behind it I actually do agree with. The serpent becomes three spirits, that is to say, Atma, Buddhi, Manas in our theosophical phraseology. Spirit, then, or cosmic ideation and cosmic substance, one of whose principles is ether, are one, and include the elements, in the sense that St. Paul attaches to them. These elements are the veiled synthesis standing for the Dayan Kohans, Devas, Sephiroth, Shashpins, archangels, etc., etc. That would be the seventh plane of existence. The ether of science, the illus of barosis, or the protyle of chemistry, constitutes, so to speak, the rude material, relatively, out of which the above-named builders, following the plan traced out for them eternally in the divine thought, fashion the systems in the cosmos. They are myths, we are told. No more so than ether and the atoms, we answer. The two latter are the absolute necessities of physical science. The builders are as absolute a necessity of metaphysics. We are twitted with, "You never saw them." And we ask the materialist, "Have you ever seen ether, or your atoms, or again, your force?" Well, you got a problem there, because we can, indeed, see atoms. Moreover, one of the greatest Western evolutionists of our modern day, the coadjutor of Darwin, Mr. A.R. Wallace, when discussing the inadequacy of natural selection alone to account for the physical form of man, admits the guiding action of higher intelligences as a necessary part of the great laws which govern the material universe. Contributions to theory of natural selection. These higher intelligences are the Dayan Kohans of the occultist. Indeed, there are few myths in any religious system worthy of the name, but have an historical as well as scientific foundation. Myths, justly observes Pocock, are now proved to be fables, just as in proportion as we misunderstand them, truths in proportion as they were once understood. The one prevailing, most distinct idea found in all ancient teaching, with reference to cosmic evolution and the first creation of our globe, with all of its products, organic and inorganic, strange word for an occultist to use, is that the whole cosmos has sprung from the divine thought. This thought impregnates matter, which is co-eternal with the one reality, and all that lives and breathes evolves from the emanations of the one immutable Parabrahm equals Mula Prakriti, the eternal one root. The former of these is, so to say, an aspect of the central point, turned inwards into regions quite inaccessible to human intellect, and is absolute abstraction. Whereas, in its aspect as Mula Prakriti, the eternal root of all, it gives one some hazy comprehension at least of the mystery of being. Therefore, it was taught in the inner temples that this visible universe of spirit and matter is but the concrete image of the ideal abstraction. It was built on the model of the first divine idea. Thus our universe existed from eternity in a latent state. The soul animating this purely spiritual universe is the central sun, the highest deity itself. It was not the one who built the concrete form of the idea, but the first begotten, and as it was constructed on the geometrical figure of the dodecahedron, footnote, Plato, Timaeus. We have done Plato, Timaeus. It is part of the ancient lore playlist if you are interested. The first begotten was pleased to employ 12,000 years in his creation. See the 12,000-year disaster cycle if you are interested. The latter number is expressed in the Tyrrhenian cosmogony. Footnote. Suides versus Tyrrhenia, which shows man created in the 6th millennium. This agrees with the Egyptian theory of 6,000 years. Again, see the 12,000-year disaster cycle for the half cycle, which would be 6,000 years, and with the Hebrew computation. Footnote. The reader will understand that by years is meant ages, not mere periods of 13 lunar months each. That is arguable. But it is the but it is the exoteric form of it. The secret computation explains that the 12,000 and the 6,000 are years of Brahma, one day of Brahma being equivalent to 4,320,000,000,000 years, or no, 4,320,000,000 years. Sanchoniathon, footnote. See the Greek translation by Philobibilius. Sanchoniathon, in his Cosmogony, declares that when the wind, spirit, became enamored of its own principles, the chaos, the intimate union took place, which connection was called pothos, and from this sprang the seed of all. And the chaos knew not its own production, for it was senseless, but from its embrace the wind was generated, mote, or the illus, mud. Footnote. Corey, Ancient Fragment. From this proceeded the spores of creation and the generation of the universe. Zeus, Zen, Aether, and Chthoniya, the chaotic earth, and Metis, the water, his wives, Osiris and Isis Latona, the former god also representing Ether, the first emanation of the supreme deity, Ammon, the primeval source of light, the goddess earth and water again. Mithras, footnote. Mithras was regarded among the Persians as the Theo-Ekpetros, god of the rock. Mithras, the rock-born god, the symbol of the male mundane fire, or the personified primordial light, and Mithra, the fire goddess, at once his mother and his wife, the pure element of fire, the active or male principle, regarded as light and heat, in conjunction with earth and water, or matter, female or passive elements of cosmical generation. Mithras is the son of Bjord, the Persian mundane mountain. Footnote. Bjord is called a fire mountain, a volcano. Therefore it contains fire, rock, earth, and water, the male, or active, and the female, or passive, elements. The myth is suggestive. From which he flashed out as a radiant ray of light, Brahma, the fire god, and his prolific consorts, and the Hindu Agni, the refulgent deity from whose body issue 1,000 streams of glory and 7 tongues of flame, and in whose honor certain Brahmins preserve to this day a perpetual fire. Siva, personated by the mundane mountain of the Hindus, the Maru. These terrific fire gods, who are said in the legend to have descended from heaven, like the Jewish Jehovah, in a pillar of fire, and a dozen other archaic double-sexed deities, all loudly proclaim their hidden meaning. And what could these dual myths mean but psychochemical principle of primordial creation, the first evolution and its triple manifestation of spirit, force, and matter? The divine correlation at its starting point. And I want to point out that spirit, force, and matter is spirit, force, and matter. The divine correlation at its starting point, allegorized as the marriage of fire and water, products of electrifying spirit, union of the male active principle with the female passive element, which become the parents of the Tellurian child, cosmic matter, the prima materia, whose soul is ether, and whose shadow is the astral light, Isis unveiled. The fragments of the systems that have now reached us are rejected as absurd fables. Nevertheless, occult science, having survived even the great flood that submersed the antediluvian giants, and with them their very memory, save in the secret doctrine, the Bible, and other scriptures, still holds the key to all the world's problems. It is important to note that, at least according to the Bible, the flood did not kill all of the giants. Let us apply that key to the rare fragments of long-forgotten cosmogonies and try by their scattered parts to re-establish the one universal cosmogony of the secret doctrine. The key fits them all. No one can study ancient philosophies seriously without perceiving that the striking similitude of conception between all, in their exoteric form, very often, in their hidden spirit invariably, is the result of no mere coincidence, but of a concurrent design, and that there was, during the youth of mankind, one languages, one knowledge, one universal religion, when there were no churches, no creeds or sects, but when every man was a priest unto himself. And if it is shown that already in those ages which are shut out from our sight by the exuberant growth of tradition, human religious thought developed in uniform sympathy in every portion of the globe, then it becomes evident that, born under whatever latitude, in the cold north or the burning south, in the east or west, that thought was inspired by the same revelations, and man was nurtured under the protecting shadow of the same tree of knowledge. And that is going to bring us to the end of this section. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I understand. I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. This is one of those days when I really do hope that I brought a little bit of clarification, right? To me, the things discussed here revolve primarily around the plasma, the primordial spark of change, the turning the now into the next in whatever scale you happen to want to investigate it, right? The revolution in an atom of the electrons around the nucleus is the spirit in action. You taking a breath and the oxygen getting dispersed to your fingers is the plasma in action. The interaction between solar systems in far space that is visible now to us, thanks to the James Webb Telescope in large part, is literally the same thing, right? You deciding to move your fingers and creating the spark is the same motivating principle as the atom moving. It is the protasm of change. It is plasma in action. That is my speculation. That is what I believe. It is what I hold to, but it is not necessarily proven fact. It is, however, something that has allowed me to use that force. I can manipulate that, right? I cannot create a fireball and throw it across the room, but I have been able to disenfranchise myself from this corporeal existence, right? I have taken myself out of this vessel, right? The me that makes the decisions left this this 5-dimensional temple. I have done that. I have moved the energies and healed myself in my throat, my shoulder. I am healing myself in my back. I am doing things that are trackable and traceable, even though they haven't been tracked or traced. I have the results, and so I hold a little bit more firmly than people who are merely speculating. I believe that I have one of the keys, right? I am trying to relay those keys as best as I can. We use these various studies because they keep me on track and help me to differentiate how I want to express so that you can understand it. Hopefully, at least in part, we have done that today. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share stuff. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree with anything that I've stated here. Drop it in the comments, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me discuss, as we are doing here, drop that in the comments as well. And if you really like what I'm doing here, hit me with that super thanks. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.